A picture with her in-laws and who else but the Chick-fil-A cow, only to find out the man in the cow suit was her husband, and she is, 6 months pregnant. So good luck. Eat lots of chicken sandwiches. See you.
Deadly violence rips through the capital of Afghanistan for the second time in a week. At least 95 people killed, more than 100 others wounded in a suicide bombing today in Kabul, and the number of dead likely to rise. Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Melissa Francis, in today for Julie Banderas.
Good to have you with us, Melissa, and good to see you again. I'm Kelly Wright. The bloodshed comes on the heels of a deadly assault on a luxury hotel last Saturday, with the Taliban claiming responsibility for both attacks. The attacker today managed to get through a checkpoint, raising new questions about security in the capital of the war-torn country. David Lee Miller is live now from our Middle East Bureau with more details. David?
Kelly, this was the worst attack in the city of Kabul since May, when 150 people died. The attack today is being called an atrocity and a massacre, prompting outrage not only because of the high death toll, but because an ambulance, a vehicle associated with saving lives, was used to destroy nearly 100. The force of the blast shook the capital, windows shattered, dozens of cars destroyed, hospitals were overwhelmed. Most of the dead are civilians, but security forces were also among the dead. The area where the attack took place has government offices, embassies, and many shops.
The route was leading to the former Interior Ministry and to the Indian Consulate, Indonesian Embassy, and the High Peace Council office. Police identified the suicide attacker, but before he could be killed, he blew up the explosives and unfortunately caused such a huge number of casualties.
Reaction to the blast was swift. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson issued a statement that said in part, quote, "The Taliban's use of an ambulance as a weapon to target civilians represents inhumane disregard for the people of Afghanistan and all those trying to bring peace to the country, and is violation of the most basic international norms." The U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan called the attack senseless and cowardly. Pakistan issued a statement saying no cause or ends justify acts of terrorism against innocent people. Earlier this week, the U.S. repeated its demand that Pakistan, which shares a porous border with Afghanistan, stop giving sanctuary to Taliban militants, specifically those affiliated with the Haqqani network. Now, it's not only the Taliban who are trying to destabilize Afghanistan. Earlier this week, on Wednesday, ISIS took responsibility for an attack at the humanitarian group Save the Children in the city of Jalalabad. 4 people died. And now, as a result of what happened, because of the security situation there, Save the Children has temporarily suspended its operations in the country. Kelly?
David Lee Miller with a report about a shocking incident. Thank you so much for the report, and we'll continue to follow that story.
President Trump is back at the White House after addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos, and now gearing up for his first State of the Union on Tuesday. The president also pitching a new immigration plan, which is sparking strong reaction in Washington. Rich Edson is live at the White House with more. Rich.
Good afternoon, Melissa. And senior administration officials are now offering a preview for the president's State of the Union address, which he'll deliver to Congress Tuesday. Officials are saying the president will highlight the economy, economic progress, immigration, national security, a $1 trillion plan to rebuild infrastructure in the United States, and how the White House maintains it will be done right and fast. Also, the president will outline efforts to fight terrorism and North Korea. This as the White House also releases a proposal on immigration to essentially provide a path to citizenship, a 10 to 12-year path to citizenship for 1.8 million dreamers, those brought to the United States illegally as children. Though in return, the White House does want Democrats to agree to $25 billion to create a trust fund for a border wall, also the end of chain migration and the visa lottery system. Though the president is still maintaining he does want to help keep the dreamers in the United States.
Everybody wants to solve the DACA problem. They've been wanting to solve it for a long time. It should have been solved by President Obama. It would have been easier to solve it, especially when he had the House and the Senate. They could have solved it in a day. But they didn't solve it. He didn't solve things. And he did something that he didn't have the right to do. You understand. He did an executive order, and that was no good. And by the way, the court, it wasn't me. The courts were not upholding that executive order. You have to do it through Congress. I want to solve the DACA problem.
Now, while the White House has a role here, the negotiations are largely in the Congress right now. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has rejected the president's proposal and has said that he's taken funding for a border wall off the table. He said he doesn't want the president using the DACA recipients, the Dreamers, as a political tool to extract concessions from Democrats. To that, the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, says, quote, "Actually, Senator Schumer, America's legal immigration system has been torn apart for decades by Washington politicians like yourself who prefer open borders and sanctuary cities over law and order and popular common sense reforms." This also ties into the government funding fight. A good chunk of government funding is set to run out again the early part of next month. Melissa?
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly.
The wave of sexual misconduct allegations sweeping across the nation now hitting Las Vegas. According to the Wall Street Journal, several women now accusing Steve Wynn of sexual misconduct, the casino mogul and RNC finance chairman, denying those allegations. Will Carr is live from our West Coast Bureau with more details about this. Will?
And Kelly, the Wall Street Journal is laying out alarming and detailed allegations against Steve Wynn. The Journal reporting that it contacted more than 150 people, dozens of whom conveyed a pattern of alleged sexual misconduct by Wynn that lasted for decades. One of the more damning allegations comes from a manicurist who accuses Wynn of forcing her to have sex with him back in 2005. According to the Journal, Wynn later paid the woman $7.5 million in a settlement. Responding to the story, Wynn tells Fox News in a statement, "The idea that I ever assaulted any woman is preposterous." He goes on to say the accusations stem from a battle with his ex-wife over a divorce settlement. At the same time, the board of directors of Wynn Resorts tells us it has formed a special committee to look into the allegations. The Journal detailed a number of alleged sexual misconduct reports against Wynn, whose birthday is today. Now, he's a larger-than-life figure in Las Vegas. He helped build numerous hotels and casinos and took over as finance chairman for the Republican National Committee after President Trump took office. Allegations are already turning political with all of this. The DNC releasing a statement. In the exact words of RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, "If you stand for treating women well and you stand for the respect of women, you shouldn't take money from somebody who treated women with the absolute highest level of disrespect." So far, we have not heard from President Trump or the RNC. Kelly.
Will Carr from our West Coast Bureau. Thank you, Will.
So for more on this, let's bring in John Bussey, associate editor at the Wall Street Journal, and he is also a Fox News contributor. There are numerous statements out at this point, John. The latest coming from Mr. Wynn himself, saying the idea that he ever assaulted anyone, any woman, is preposterous. And he goes on to talk about how this is motivated by his ex-wife trying to renegotiate their settlement. Does any of that make a difference in the court of public opinion if he paid someone $7.5 million?
Curious, don't you think? You know, Melissa, you've covered these things, you know, since you've covered business for years. You've seen this happen before, high-level executives accused of this sort of behavior. There's a lot of implications here. I mean, anybody who kind of wishes to get a sense of whether Mr. Wynn, whether his comments sort of in any way mitigate these claims, just needs to read the story. It's pretty extensive. There are a lot of allegations in there, and I think the reader will come away with their own view of that. There's a lot of implications of this for Mr. Wynn, for his company, for the RNC. As you just heard, the RNC, you know, Mr. Wynn is the finance chairman. He's a friend of Donald Trump. The RNC is already saying, hey, you know, maybe you should give money back if you got it from Steve Wynn. But you also know that, I mean, these types of charges, these types of incidents are non-denominational. They cross the political spectrum, Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've heard it all over the place, and that's part of the reason why you have to, or political parties have to be careful when they give advice about what the other side should do as something's going on, knowing that it will be advice that they will be taking in the future if they're smart.
That's exactly right.
But so what does it mean for him as the finance chair? Because on one hand, he could take a less high-profile position, but Democrats are obviously pushing it to the point of you should give the money back the same way, you know, Democrats were pressured into giving back Harvey Weinstein's money.
Precisely right. And the RNC is going to want to distance itself from Mr. Wynn as these allegations play out. The company has launched an internal investigation of Mr. Wynn. That will, at some point, have revelations or a conclusion. RNC may wish to then react to that. But the RNC is going to be kind of, I think at this point, forced to distance itself. We're going into the 2018 campaign. It's not going to want this hanging over its candidates. The company is very much tied to WYNN. His name is on the company, right? It's WYNN Resorts. And it has already said in SEC filings, in standard SEC filings, that if anything were to happen to Mr. WYNN, that could have negative effects on the company. We saw the stock drop substantially when our story appeared on Friday.
Yeah.
And there are regulatory issues involved. You're going to see some, regulators investigating this as well.
No, anyone who hasn't read it in the Wall Street Journal, it details many complaints, many instances, many different people corroborating each other's story who witnessed things. I mean, it's not just, he brings up the point that we live in a day and age right now where someone can make an accusation in a public forum, shout it on Twitter, and someone's reputation is tarnished, whether that's followed through or not. That doesn't really apply to him because there are so many people in this article who came forward. And he's also paid settlements. I mean, that's what makes it a little bit different, and that's their court records where people went into court and made statements, and he paid one person as much as $7.5 million. And that's not a number, you say sometimes you pay people because you don't want the embarrassment or you don't want it out there. Not 7.5 million, right, John? Or
yeah, so it's everything that you just said. He's blaming his ex-wife.
Which could be true. I mean, she could be trying to renegotiate this, and that's why she's bringing it up. It doesn't change the fact that he paid someone,
and doesn't change the fact that a lot of other people spoke with our reporters about what apparently has been going on for quite some time within the company.
At the same time, there is, of course, another story out in the New York Times about Hillary Clinton choosing to shield an advisor who was her spiritual advisor. Burns Strider, her faith advisor, sent her passages and to read every morning. He was the founder of the American Values Network and was moved. He had a woman that complained against him. She was moved away from him. He was, within the company. He had been fired several months later, but he was docked pay. They took action against him within the company. So something happened, but Hillary Clinton refused to fire him and get rid of him from the campaign. What are the implications of this one?
Yeah, that was in 2008. Again, underscoring that misbehavior crosses all political, religious lines, of any sort. And I think that the implications of this, because she's not an elected official yet, will be limited.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Hillary Clinton has been in the vanguard of the women's movement. She did something that was extraordinary. She ran a campaign for the presidency as a woman. She has been kind of a voice of the Me Too movement, or of the women's movement in general, and the women's movement of late. And so this is a bit of a this is a New York Times story of the allegations against Mr. Strider and how the campaign reacted. It's all articulated in the story.
Yeah.
This is an example of somebody having made a judgment. May have liked the person, decided not to fire him, did dock pay, did send to counseling, which apparently he didn't ever go to, and probably in retrospect wishes she had been a little bit tougher, particularly in the current environment.
Well, she tolerated him because it suited her political needs, and I don't know. Similar, not hard to believe given what happened with her own husband. So I guess that's probably how a lot of people would read it. But she's out of office, so it's not like I don't know that this is necessarily this relevant at this point. We've got to go. John Bussey, thank you so much.
A verdict in the road rage killing of a former NFL player. The decision coming 2 years after the death of Joe McKnight. That story next. Plus, President Trump delivers his first State of the Union address Tuesday night. We'll have a preview of what's at stake, as well as the looming threat of a boycott by some Democrats.
I respect the office of the presidency. I'm not going back for the State of the Union speech because Donald Trump doesn't respect it.
The man accused of killing a former NFL player in an act of road rage has been found guilty of manslaughter. Ronald Gasser now facing up to 40 years in prison for the 2016 shooting of ex-running back Joe McKnight in the suburbs of New Orleans. Prosecutors say McKnight had been driving aggressively, but also say Gasser escalated the situation by following McKnight on a high-speed chase. The shooting happened at an intersection when McKnight got out of his car and approached Gasser.
President Trump is preparing to deliver his first State of the Union address Tuesday night. The president is expected to tout tax reform and a booming economy, as well as discuss the future of immigration reform. Joining me now is Doug Weed, presidential historian and former senior White House staffer for President George H.W. Bush. He's also author of the book Game of Thorns, the inside story of Hillary Clinton's failed campaign and Donald Trump's winning strategy. Doug, good to see you as always. It's been a while.
Kelly.
But let's talk about this. What do you expect from President Trump's first State of the Union address?
Oh, jobs, jobs, jobs.
It's the economy, right?
Yeah, I compare it to 2014 when President Obama laid out his vision of jobs, shovel-ready jobs, and a year later the New York Times said those shovel-ready jobs weren't very shovel-ready, were they? Fuzzy Wuzzy wasn't very fuzzy wuzzy wuzzy. But this time, the president goes in. He goes into a speech and he's got those jobs already in the pocket.
Yeah, he has to feel very good about that. And what specifically should he say when he not only discusses jobs, but what it will mean for America's future?
I'd like to see him, and I've seen him pivoting towards caring for minorities. There's been these accusations of racism against him, and lately he's been talking about the fact that unemployment is now the lowest it's ever been for African Americans, and I wouldn't be surprised if he pivots that way. This will be a speech, Kelly, that's very different. Most of these speeches come in times of crises.
Right.
I think of 1975, when Gerald Ford's State of the Union speech, he said, the State of the Union is not good. And then he talked about unemployment and how dependent we were on others for energy. And this time a president can say the State of the Union is good. And then here's where we're going to go next.
You know, we're looking at some factors as it relates to the economy, the fact that we're doing so well with unemployment. You were mentioning African Americans. There's also the women factor, how well they've been doing in terms of employment. But there are some people who will not attend the State of the Union address because they're upset with the president and some of his rhetoric and his tweets, which have not only been tough, but also disparaging to various groups of people in the eyes of those who are choosing not to attend.
Yeah, that's right. And we also didn't mention senior citizens. As a senior citizen, I got to say my 401ks have performed better in the last year than they have the previous 16 years under two presidents, a Republican and a Democrat. But you're right. We live in a different time, Kelly. Negative campaigning. People no longer elect a president because they like him or her. They vote against the other guy. And Lee Atwater, I once worked for him, and he could show you the metrics, how negative campaigning works. So you have two things going on. One, negative campaigning. Here's a president who got elected because people didn't like the other person. And two, you've got tremendous bias in the media, unlike anything we've had before. Measured, numbers measured, 90%, 91%, 96% in terms of money donated. So those two factors make this an interesting year. He's got all these positive things, but he's got all this negative against him.
And some of it he's brought on himself by just the sheer nature of Donald Trump's personality, where he'll go after people who go after him. But I want to ask you this. What will he have to say to the country about DACA and moving it forward? Will he address that in this State of the Union address?
You know, Lao Tzu, the philosopher, said that people who have knowledge don't predict, and people who predict have no knowledge. And that goes double for Donald Trump. I know what he should do. He should appeal to DACA and say, here's a chance to strengthen our borders and help all these people's dreams come true. But it is a power play, because Democrats have opposed Asians and white immigrants for years. The Asians coming out of Vietnam were opposed openly by Democrat leadership, and Republicans have tended to oppose Latino and African American immigrants, precisely because the one will vote for Republican and the other tend to vote for Democrat.
Yeah, you said a lot right there. That's for sure. Doug, always good to talk to you. And
thank you.
Come back soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Doug Weed. And remember, we will have complete coverage of the President's State of the Union address right here. That's at 9 Eastern Tuesday night. You can see it all, as I've mentioned, right here on Fox News.
Republicans speaking out against newly recovered missing texts between two former FBI officials. Why some lawmakers are saying it shows more both sides of the aisle. But first, here's Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Even one victim of a crime committed in this fashion is one too many. Criminals have no right to demand entry into the United States. We have a duty to select people that we believe will flourish and be law-abiding.
Sunday, on the next edition of Scandalous, the Paula Jones case hits the courtroom.
We said, look, Mr. President, you have to answer these charges.
A major shakeup in the investigation.
Ken Starr was regarded as Republican and quite conservative.
And the shutdown that led to the first infamous White House encounter. Sunday, it all kicks off with the premiere that had everyone talking. Then, don't miss episode 2, A Woman Named Paula.
Welcome back. Newly recovered text messages between two FBI officials raising concerns now about the impartiality of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Republicans reacting to those texts between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, saying they show the investigation was fixed in Clinton's favor.
If the fix was in on the Clinton investigation and then these same people, top people at the FBI, started and ran the Trump-Russia investigation, might there be some bad things going on there as well? And as you look at these text messages, it sure looks like there is.
Lauren Blanchard joins us now from our Washington Bureau with more details. Lauren.
Well, Kelly, the text released by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley suggests senior FBI officials were concerned that being too tough on Hillary Clinton for her email use could come back to hurt them if she were elected president. Now, the texts also show back in March of 2016, there was a proposal circulating, at least in some meetings, to name former U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald as a special prosecutor of a possible Clinton email probe. However, Fitzgerald was never appointed, despite Republicans calling for it.
It looks like they're talking about not using sufficient FBI resources and purposely withholding FBI resources and pulling back in order not to get Mrs. Clinton angry. And it explains why the FBI investigation was half-baked and ridiculous.
Thousands of messages between the officials, now demoted FBI agent Peter Strzok and reassigned FBI lawyer Lisa Page, were thought to be lost after a technical glitch. But the DOJ Inspector General says they were able to recover them. And the texts are boosting Republicans who believe special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into possible Russian collusion during the presidential election is biased because both Strzok and Page worked briefly on the Russia probe, and many of their texts suggest an anti-Trump sentiment. Senator Grassley, who released the recovered text messages, say the timing is disconcerting, prompting the Attorney General to defend his department.
It's a little bit odd that would happen, and so it legitimately raises questions.
My purpose every day is to get the department back to its fundamental mission of enforcing the law and protecting the safety of Americans with integrity and fairness.
And some of those fiercest advocates for a Clinton email probe say the texts are renewing suspicion that top officials never planned to pursue charges in the Clinton case. Kelly?
Lauren Blanchard from Washington, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in our panel. Cabot Phillips is a media director for campusreform.org and a former digital director for Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. Antoine Seawright is the founder and CEO of Blueprint Strategy and a Democratic strategist. Cabot, I'll start with you. One of the most revealing texts that came out is the one where they say that they don't want to switch over from the Clinton investigation to the Trump-Russia investigation because they feel like there's no there there. That's pretty telling.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember a week ago when the Democrats were saying that there's a conspiracy theory to try and claim that there was any sort of personal bias from the people running the FBI investigation. And now we have indisputable evidence of it. And their narrative has changed from it's a conspiracy to now they're saying, so what? You're allowed to have personal opinions, aren't you? This is hypocrisy, okay? And the left loves to talk about collusion and everything that the Republicans are doing, collusion, collusion, collusion. We have now indisputable evidence that there is collusion happening at the FBI to try and shed negative press on President Trump and to try to give Hillary Clinton, a cakewalk to the presidency, and that's a problem.
Yeah, Antoine, this does tie into that memo that we keep hearing so much about, but we haven't seen yet. Congressman Peter King saying that if everyone saw the memo, as he thinks we will in the next few days or so, that they would see that there was no basis to start the Russia investigation to begin with. That's got to scare Americans into thinking that the FBI is doing things it shouldn't.
Well, I don't think there's anything going on at the FBI. And look, I think you said it right earlier.
You don't think there's anything going on at the FBI?
I don't. I don't think it's wrong for people who work a job, who are normal human beings, to have a political opinion. The truth of the matter is Hillary Clinton is not the president of the United States. What we need to be laser focused on is what the special prosecutor is doing as it relates to Donald Trump and his possible collusion with Russia. And I think that's what the FBI should have their focus on and not getting distracted because of political pressure from
Antoine,
Republican members of Congress.
What about the fact that these individuals didn't want to be a part of that investigation because they felt like it wasn't going anywhere, there was no there, and they didn't want to waste their time? That doesn't tell you anything about the Mueller investigation?
No, it doesn't tell me anything. What will tell us everything is when this investigation is over and all the pieces to the puzzle we put together, and there'll be some sort of conclusion about whether there was or is collusion or not with Donald Trump and his campaign in Russia.
So to that end, Cabot, would you like to see the memo to see how this investigation got started in the first place? I mean, Antoine wants to see it come to an end. Maybe we should see how it started.
I think the American people deserve the truth of what's going on, and more information given to the American public is never a bad thing. I always think it's important for there to be facts, and if there was collusion, the American people deserve to know about it. However, I want to take you to an alternate universe, Antoine. If Hillary Clinton had been elected president, and there were text messages from high-ranking FBI officials saying that they wanted to let off Donald Trump easy and they wanted to try and hurt Hillary Clinton, I have a feeling you'd be singing a different tune. You would say it's wrong. You would call out the bias there, and you can't deny that. Come on, you're playing politics here.
I don't know. I don't know what I would say in whatever situation. What I do know is that there is a tremendous effort by the GOP to undermine and politicize the FBI, and that's never happened before. And I don't think we should do that. I think we should let the FBI
is doing that themselves, though, with these text messages and with the rigging.
No, they're not. It's members of Congress and the president trying to politicize and undermine the most trusted institution we have, and that is the FBI.
Cabot, how do you respond to that?
The FBI has done great work for generations, and the work that Comey and these new FBI officials has done has undermined that. The FBI, of course, there are great people around the country that are doing their job, but that's why it's even more important for us to call out the people who aren't. And it's impossible to deny that there are people in the FBI who are letting their personal opinions get in the way of doing their jobs right, and that needs to be called out.
Hang on one second. Antoine, what's different about this? Hang on. What's different about this is that we haven't seen text messages of investigators in the past. I mean, plenty of other investigations have gone on, but we haven't had insight into their unguarded thoughts before. And maybe it's always been like this, but it's scary to think that while they were doing their work, they were very consciously thinking, we want this person who's under investigation to win the election. And when the other person won, they're thinking, we need an insurance policy. This is a secret society, and we're really unhappy with this outcome. What can we do about it? That's scary.
Well, here's what I can tell you. Regardless of what text messages may have occurred in the FBI, that was not going to impact the outcome of the election. The American voters will ultimately decide who our elected officials are in this country. And it's not uncommon for people,
it doesn't impact the election, but it impacts their investigation. That's our point. It's impacting law enforcement.
I don't think the politics of these career people at the FBI will not allow them to do their jobs that they've been doing for years on top of years on top of years. And I think us trying to make a big deal about this is really drawing unnecessary attention to it and really trying to politicize this.
Yeah, Cabot, do you think their political opinions were impacting the way that they were enforcing the law?
There's a difference between texting your coworker, might I add, texting your coworker 40,000 times which is a whole nother story there. There was a difference between texting your coworker, man, what do you think about this election? This is crazy what's happening with Donald Trump. And then texting them, how can we use our positions to create an insurance policy? How can we impact this election? And that's what occurred. That is politicization right there of their jobs. It's not some conspiracy theory.
I think it's very important that you not make assumptions here. I think it's very important that no one make assumptions here. The truth of the matter is,
we're just reading the text.
Until we know what these people are thinking and we ask them, we're making assumptions.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. Kelly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
President Trump pitching a new immigration plan offering a pathway for the so-called dreamers to become U.S. citizens in exchange for paying for a border wall and other immigration crackdowns. Allison Barber has more from Washington.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the White House's framework guidance that, quote, indicates what is necessary for the president to sign a bill into law. He added, I am hopeful that as discussions continue in the Senate on the subject of immigration, members on both sides of the aisle will look to this framework for guidance as they work towards an agreement. Before the White House's outline made its way to Congress, a senator involved in bipartisan immigration talks said talks in the Senate would continue regardless of what happens at the White House.
They're not going to be locked down by thinking about what the House might do or what the White House might do. We're going to move on our own.
The White House hasn't released a complete blueprint of their proposal, only a framework, but already there are critics on the left and the right.
They want the ransom for these children to be $25 billion for a wall when we have all of the needs that we have for infrastructure in our own country.
If the president serves up 1.8 million people for an amnesty in exchange for $25 billion for a wall and then reduces the numbers of chain migration that come in, that's the end of his enforcement that he's going to get in his administration unless we come up with another amnesty.
Some key conservatives like Senator Tom Cotton say they like the White House's proposal. Cotton called it generous and humane, a balance between protecting dreamers and securing the border. In the past, some on Capitol Hill said they were frustrated because many felt like they didn't know exactly what President Trump wanted in an immigration proposal. Leader McConnell suggesting in his statement that this is clarity. Kelly?
Allison Barber reporting. Thank you.
It's music's biggest night, the Grammy Awards, taking place right here in New York City tomorrow night. A look at the favorites with a top-selling singer-songwriter next.
What y'all